So we have come to the end of our presentation. We are just going to give the 5 lucky people the chance for us to answer your question. And then we are going to bring the rest of the questions onto social media so that we could discuss it in our baking industry professional group. So if you're on LinkedIn or Facebook, join our baking industry professional BIP groups, because we are going to continue the conversations there. Okay, so let's take a stab, Mark, at the first question that comes onto our queue, which is, hang on, let's see. Okay, so it's in your area, Mark. Is it possible to use soft oil, as in PUFA, in combination with rosemary extract?
Yes, PUFA is an industry acronym that is used for polyunsaturated fatty acids. So these are long chain fatty acids that have a relatively short shelf life to some extent, right? And rosemary extract will extend the shelf life of the oil. It does improve the oxidative stability. We've done a lot of research in that area. There are a lot of suppliers who supply rosemary extract specifically for that purpose, to add to your fats and oils. So, but to be clear, it's not going to extend the shelf life of your bread per se. It is going to extend the shelf life of the fat, the PUFA you're using in your bread or your cakes, to prevent it from becoming rancid too soon. So while you might have all of the mold and staling and everything under control, and now you use a polyunsaturated fat and it is going rancid within a couple of weeks, you can use rosemary extract up to a point that I guess you would say it's appealing, because it can leave a flavor as you go up in the amount.
Awesome, thanks. Do milk proteins help in good texture and delay staling?
They definitely help in texture. They help act as emulsifiers. They will reduce staling some. Not as effectively, perhaps, as, say, something like the sponge and dough process or enzymes or other emulsifiers. But in combination, it is helpful, certainly. Yeah.
Okay, I agree with Mark. Definitely in combination. So, can you share your good bread recipe, Mark?
My go-to favorite bread recipe is really simple, and it's I think it's 1040B or something like that in the American Association of Cereal Chemists, right? And it's the basic bread baker's recipe, and I have found it to be really good as a starting point to fine-tune to your own tastes and desires. And it's the famous 2% recipe, and that is, it's 100% flour. And then your water would be based on the quality of your flour. So probably 55 to 65 in that range absorption, 2% sugar, 2% salt, 2% fat, 2% milk powder, and 2% fresh yeast.
That's easy.
That's
remember.
Anybody can remember that.
Yes. All right. Let's see. Does top taste fried onions affect the microbial quality of the buns, or does it decrease shelf life?
It does, so far from what we've seen, just like with regular fresh onions, it is increasing the shelf life. We've not done lab studies for microbial analysis. We've done our own evaluation of baking, bagging it, treating it without kid gloves, I would say, and that we don't touch it with dirty hands, but we're wearing gloves and just, not fussing, leaving it out long and stuff like that. And I baked these in my kitchen at home, and I baked these a week ago, and they're completely mold free in 1 week, and they were bagged about an hour after they were baked. So as soon as they were cool, pretty much. So I believe that what is aiding the onions in this as well is because these onions, to make them crispy and so nicely evenly caramelized, they are deep fried, and the fat that is remaining, I think, is adding to help with also with reducing staling, but also somehow is affecting the production and mold growth in some way. Or maybe it's just helping transmit the other enzymes from the onion even better or something. I don't know. But we seem to see an improvement.
We need a scientific study on this.
We need it, yeah. We need a good micro lab who'll raise their hand and
Okay, one more question. This is Vinay from Fine Organics. Hello. What exactly is the best recipe and process to be followed for sponge and dough, Mark?
Generally speaking, rough estimate is about 25% of the flour, all of the yeast, and then hydrate the sponge like you would in the same hydration rate for your dough. So like around 60%, something like that. And
how many hours?
Usually minimum 4 hours. As some do shorter sponge, but they don't produce the same flavor, and they don't produce as much enzyme activity. And they should be kept at a constant temperature as well. So you can either do, like, say, 4 hours you usually want to keep it between 70 to 75, so not in a full proofer. So that's why, having a sponge room separately is, again, you can't just use the proofer as your sponge room. 90 degrees is too warm. It's too fast. It needs time. If you want to go more artisan style, you can do an 8 to 12 hour sponge and do it in a refrigerator or something like that, where it's very slow, the fermentation, and that gives you even more enzyme activity. So it's about, it's that balance between fermentation and enzyme activity. Too much fermentation, not enough enzyme. Too much enzyme activity, or lots of enzyme activity, not much fermentation. So it changes the flavor profiles in that way as well too.
And I've just got one more thing to add to that. A lot of bakers don't put much consideration into developing the sponge. And I say you need to put more consideration into fully developing the sponge.
Yes.
And this is why. I have seen a huge fermentation time difference between a developed sponge versus a non-developed sponge. Okay. The more mixing you give it, the less fermentation it will take to get to the right stage. The less mixing you give it, the longer time it will take before it gets to the right stage. Okay, so mixing and hydration in sponge prior to the bulk fermentation process is really important. So don't forget about that.
Yeah, unlike a poolish can be just mixed together. A sponge, even my biga, I fully developed the biga. Yeah, it's harder because the biga is so stiff, but it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. So we have passed our 15-minute mark. So we really have to end this session today. More and more questions come into our Q&A, it gives me an indication that this particular session needs to be continued on sometime in the future. But what Joanna needs to do is pretty much put these questions onto our different LinkedIn and Facebook pages so that we can continue the discussion over there. Okay. So thank you everyone for coming on, and tune in next week for the release of the YouTube session, and share with your friends if you need. Okay. So thank you, Mark, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.